This is episode 1124.
We think that we can do 20% more with 20% less, just using tools that are available. So there's this, if we do things correctly, there'll be a massive pickup on efficiency and output from the company in terms of the things that we want to do. And, we're going through our planning cycle right now, and it's really fascinating to see how people have manifested how AI enablement inside the company can do things, from support to things that we can do in accounting to automation of projects that were very, very manual, et cetera. Externally, we have this incredible distribution for all of these vendors and partners. They're building agentic components. We're building we're a marketplace. We need to incorporate those different, I don't know if you want to call them bots or AI components or some of this or modules, and enable our downstream clients for efficiency as well. I think a lot of this big industry is actually moving into the SMB very, very quickly. And we need to be an AI enablement platform for them.
The path to the CFO office for Craig Foster began during the dot-com era, when he was a young manager navigating one of tech's most turbulent chapters. Today, he's CFO of Pax8, where he's helping rewire the marketplace for the AI era. Pax8 serves as the link between major software vendors like Microsoft and thousands of managed service providers that in turn support small and mid-sized businesses today. This is Foster's sixth CFO appointment, shaped by technology transformations, capital markets, and value creation. Our talk with CFO Craig Foster begins after this. We're pleased to welcome back Craig Foster. This past spring, he stepped into the CFO role at Pax8, where he now leads financial strategy through a period of rapid growth and AI-driven transformation, helping the company evolve into a managed intelligence marketplace. Craig, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I thought after the first time, maybe you wouldn't have me back, but here we go.
Craig, I tipped my hand a little bit before we came on, mentioning a chapter that I thought, given the fact that we previously traced your broader career journey, this time I thought I'd ask you to zero in on a few chapters in particular. And the fact is, I don't know if the name Loudcloud means something to some of the younger listeners today, but during one of the most turbulent periods in tech history, the dot-com crash, you were at Loudcloud, and there was an IPO. The IPO itself has become something of a case study, remembered for its timing and all the financial strain and the tough trade-offs the company had to make during that time. You were there. Looking back now, can you just reflect a little on that Loudcloud chapter for us and share with us maybe what it taught you, some of the lessons you brought forward even today as a finance leader?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the two guys that founded the company are really, I always consider pillars of the VC environment today, which is Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. And some people don't even know those names, but Mark Andreessen is the guy who created, in college or as a graduate student, created a Netscape browser. And a Netscape browser is considered probably one of the biggest unlocks of the whole generation of, what the internet is today. And so after they sold their company to, I think it was AOL, they sold their company. They worked at AOL for a while and they were like, this is an old stodgy company. I have an idea on something that I want to create. And when people were being launched on AOL, which is essentially they could drive all this traffic to the new websites for new components, the websites would always break. Because all of a sudden you have this fire hose that would attack these, that would all of a sudden have all this new traffic and nobody could scale. So why don't we build a company that can scale these websites and basically be an outsourced management company? So maybe a managed service provider inside the ecosystem. And this resonated really, really well. So now you don't have to, there's a cost abatement kind of component, which is you're now outsourcing some of these key components and these guys can do it better with process and stuff like this. So the company raised a ton of money and these guys were running the business. And I got hired into the business to actually be what they call a sales engineer or system engineer. And what that was I would go out with the sales reps and I would explain the technology. And then I kind of evolved a little into talking about how ROI works inside of it. So if you're outsourcing, you're going to save 40, 50% with us. And here's what we're going to provide. And this is why we're going to do it better with SLAs and stuff like this. So the company was founded in like 1997, 98. And just like when all of this, maybe it was 99, when all of this .com, and now they call it .com bust. But it was in the epicenter, and we were signing tons and tons of companies and clients and stuff like that. And it was a really fun time. They'd raised hundreds of millions of dollars from Benchmark and other people. And I was a middle manager there, and I wasn't even really doing core finance stuff. So it was like, but I was in the epicenter of what I would say what that company was doing.
Oh, you came from Price Waterhouse. You were a senior auditor, so you did have a traditional finance resume. This was your natural first step into industry, and you were willing not to take a conventional finance role, but maybe you were more intrigued by the business itself to figure out, what your future path might be.
Yeah, I got the job because when I was working in accounting and finance stuff, I was actually doing a lot of systems work. So there was, we were implementing all these big ERP systems and SAP and things like this in preparing for like Y2K. And what we would do is we would go out and pitch clients on why we were better, but we'd always bring a technology partner with us to kind of sweeten the deal, or like, this is what else we're going to do for you. And not just implement this where you have like a vision on how to make your pricing more transparent around the world, or we're going to do FX conversion for you or something. And we brought in this company, Loudcloud, and then the team, after we won this big piece of business with HP, they came to me on the side and said, "Hey, that was great." Because I was like the junior guy telling them how it was going to work and how we were going to do all this stuff. And they said, "Would you like to do that for us?" And I asked, this is where I'm probably a little opportunistic, but I knew wasn't probably going to be a partner in a large accounting firm. Just the pace I thought was a little bit slower than I really wanted to do from a career acceleration standpoint. And I said, "How much does that job pay?" And then I told them what I made, and they said, "We don't have a salary band that low." So when I knew that I could make a lot more money, I'm like, you know what, this sounds like a great opportunity. And I knew these guys were going to be, they were building something special.
But as you go forward, what happens?
It gets really, really messy is what happened. And so I would put the problems in a couple small buckets. And then I want to talk a little bit about the management of the team and how they actually, the fortitude to manage the team to solve these problems. So the basic premise of the company, as I mentioned before, was to provide these outsourced services for these enterprises and primarily all these emerging startups. And if you look back at the time, there was, I don't know if it's $100 billion, but billions and billions of dollars going into these new startups that were developing new business models primarily based off the internet. And that's where the high growth part of the business was. And then we would get some enterprise accounts in there that would kind of like be the cornerstones. Well, as the money started drying up in the internet space for investment, and a lot of these companies were running at massive losses and they didn't really have solidified a business model, they started dying on the vine. And if we had an investment, think of a modern component of this, which was like customer acquisition costs and when do you break even and things like this, we would not break even a year into the contract and maybe inside of a 3-year contract. And these guys were dying in 7 months. So then it was like, okay, well, how do we replace this revenue with other firms? And then you start making a lot of compromised decisions on the types of clients that you're willing to bring in, the economics of each one of those deals, because you need to replace the revenue with something that you hope is higher quality. But as the addressable market gets smaller and smaller, the addressable drops. So, I mean, real business problems. And it was, kind of eroding the install base of the business as these companies would die. And so the big workout that the company came to, the conclusion was we need to reconstruct our revenue and let's move ourselves to a software level. We built this operating system on how to deploy people and how to move code into a production environment and all these other things. Why don't we productize that and start selling that? And let's move all the hardware and the labor component let's sell that part of the business. And they actually renamed the company to Oxware. And the end part of the game was Oxware actually got sold to HP for like 2.1 billion. So even with this trials and tribulations of how difficult the business went through, and there was people when we went public, there was people that had options at $72, and we went public at $6. So I mean, it was really, really noisy, and there was no more VC money to inject into the company. So it was like we had to go public to continue operations of the company. But I think the end game of it's probably one of the biggest saves that you've seen in the last 20 years of on death's door to actually making a profit, or actually having a good outcome.
What did you, so what do you take forward? I mean, what, from witnessing an IPO during such a volatile environment, and when investor skepticism was at an ultimate peak, what's the ultimate lesson there?
Well, I think in times of crisis, a good management team is all hands on deck. And I think Ben Horowitz, who runs was a product manager at this company, NetSuite, and later was one of the co-founders of the company. He used to teach management classes. And so if you got promoted to become a manager, there was a mandatory, like a 6-week course that he taught himself. And he wrote up the coursework. And if you look back at how old he was at the time, I think he was probably 34, 35 years old, maybe even younger. And he was teaching a management course, and it was like, it was mandatory. And it was like that kind of dedication to management. I mean, I haven't worked in another company where the CEO is teaching a management course or has best practices or here's required reading or other components. And that kind of always stuck with me, is like, he wasn't just trying to build a company. He was trying to build future leaders. And if you look at the people that came out of Loudcloud, whether you think it's a success or not a success, the type of talent that they were able to attract, and the type of talent of people that are now CEOs and CFOs and have gone on to do incredible things or start other venture capital, firms or private equity or whatever. They had a real incredible start list. And I would put a lot of that on their ability to recruit and retain talent based on the way they were managing companies.
Tell us something about where you go next, because you didn't stay in the startup lane, did you? I know you go into banking. So, I mean, had you had enough for the time being?
Well, I loved the experience, and the end game for Loudcloud was it got sold, and there was a transaction. And again, I was a middle manager, so it wasn't like I led the deal and I was in charge of this, but I saw all this stuff happening around me, and I actually had talked to Ben, and there was another woman that was in charge of in marketing. And I knew that Loudcloud Oxford was coming to an end. What do you think's next for me? And they said, given your skill set, I think you should think about going back to business school, going into banking. And what I really glammed onto this stuff, because part of the sales stuff, and I was working on some BD deals and some corporate development deals and things, there's transactions behind the stuff. And I really felt like the IPO, which I wasn't an active participant, and how Wall Street works, plus my just personal interest, I really glammed onto the fact that my pitch to going into banking would be, I just went through a cycle where I learned how a company works as an operator. I saw the capital raising. We got sold, how you prepare a company for these different transitions. And if I'm a banker, I can almost guarantee you that there is very few people that are in banking that have actually run a company through the entire cycle as an operator or been participant. And so that became my pitch or my story as I went into a business school, and I went to work for business school and then went into banking. But I really got excited about the idea that I could actually be a consultative part of this. And I still think that's transcended to even what I do today, which is the CFO of public and private companies, is I'm still a consultant in some capacity or another, trying to drive to a certain outcome.
Such a unique place and time, too. I mean, you returned to business school. I wouldn't doubt there are a few other refugees from the .com era who returned to business school for a moment to sort of catch their breath and understand where they want to go.
It was actually a little bit off cycle, to be honest, because there was all this, there was, if you remember back then, people were actually leaving like Stanford and Harvard to start companies.
That's right. Yeah.
And so maybe I'm the beneficiary of that, but I went to school in 2003 and then graduated in 2005. But I can't tell if it was off cycle or off peak, but it worked out. And then there was a huge resurgence into kind of .com 2.0 or whatever it is that we still somewhat live with today.
When you decide to go into banking, I mean, should we be surprised? I mean, it sounded like you were influenced by these entrepreneurs, Horowitz and Andreessen. Yeah, I mean, it was such an interesting environment for you. I would have thought you would have returned in some other startup beyond .coms.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I thought being consultative to the .coms would probably be a better fit for me. And there's always a debate whether you want finance people to be creative or not creative. And in a discipline standpoint, you probably don't want them to be too creative in terms of accounting standards and stuff like this. But I thought it was a great opportunity to actually hone my skills on like pattern recognition, which is what better way to learn from 70 or 80 or 100 different startups and learn about their businesses and what's working and what's not working to hone my skills as what do you want to call it, a consultant or a banker or now a CFO, is I had probably more exposure to more startups than I think like 99% of my peers do.
Interesting. I want to just point out, we always like to say that your class of CFOs have often had both a .com chapter as well as a economic downturn chapter. Now you go into banking, your timing's not terrific, really. You land in the space in about 2005, but you're at UBS, you're at RBC, you're not in real estate
Yeah, that turned out to be helpful and hurtful. I mean, the industry was in real turmoil. This goes back to all the stuff that was happening with mortgage default, small stuff that just kind of put a black cloud over all things financing and activity, which had been in kind of in a boom cycle. But really what it actually created was a lot of opportunity for me. And I'll briefly explain, which was in banking in particular, you have a very distinct pyramid of who's doing what. So you have managing directors, executive directors, down to entry level people. And as the banks started like recasting what they're going to do from who's going to do what and who's going to be running certain groups, they started kind of like, okay, who's the most productive people on the platform and who's going to, they call it like grade makers or what, who's going to continue to provide revenue and get deals done or be a good steward of the bank, and where are we going to cut costs? Because if you look back, there was probably like a 40% reduction or maybe even 45-50% reduction in investment banking and the ranks. And so as they started kind of clipping maybe the guys that were at the top of the food chain, it actually opened up just an incredible, I mean, a lot of times you're waiting for the king to die. And if you're the prince, and the king was dead. So then it became like this incredible opportunity where like the world is your oyster. And now you're basically in charge. And what's the way that I would do it? Or how would I approach my accounts? Or how would I steer the car a little bit differently? And I think that was really successful.
Your banking chapter lasts a good number of years. I don't know, in retrospect, time well invested? Were you as engaged and satisfied in the work you were doing?
To be honest, I loved it. And I look back sometimes, I have no regrets on the course I've taken. And I can get back to like why that is. But a lot of people leave banking and they're kind of bitter or exhausted or something like this. And I look back at the time and the people that I met, which is basically my network today of other founders and CEOs and just the venture capitalists, private equity, whatever. I thought the conversations and you're working with the management teams and you're working with boards of directors makes the work absolutely fascinating. and I really enjoyed it. And when I left, my exit from banking was opportunistic because I'd taken a company public and we had done a pretty good job on the IPO. Or my bank was the lead underwriter. And as I got to know the management team and the CEO and the auditors and board of directors, they were going to be making a CFO change. And they approached me and said, would you be interested in joining? And so it wasn't like, hey, I really want this job or I want to take it. But as I reflected on kind of like where do I want to be in my career, I really loved the Loudcloud experience. I really enjoyed it. And it was like having your hands, and I don't want to say my hands were on the steering wheel because that was Mark and Ben and all these other space managers, but having the ability to course correct a company or steer it or move it out of harm's way or take a company from good to great, I thought was really, really an interesting project, but I think also like intellectually a little bit. And I really kind of like, how can I take all these lessons I learned from watching all these companies that I worked with? I think I worked on probably 30 IPOs. And so you watch all these companies boom to bust, make great decisions, do terrible job, poor management, incredible management. And how can I incorporate that all into like how I want to work? And I think to some extent, if you look at the different companies that I've worked at, I probably have been a little bit of a mercenary, but I've come into things that I think takes my banking experience, I think are undervalued. What can I do to actually increase value? And then where does it need to be in the long run? And so that's created a number of exits or a number of opportunities. And I really like that part of the business as well.
I want to just point out, you entered the CFO office for the first time, I think, in 2013, roughly. And you've had, several, I think a half a dozen nearly CFO chapters now behind you, or including the one you're currently in. Just moving forward, the type of CFO you are, they're primarily all tech. Are we right about that? What is the weight class of company that Craig Foster is known for? What are the characteristics? Is there something that makes you say, yes, this is an opportunity I want to be part of?
Yeah, I think I have my own lens on how I look at different companies, but it's always somehow tied to enterprise software. That was the coverage area that I did in banking. So it's cloud enabled, something that's, I think, infinitely scalable or has a lot of TAM, a lot of market potential. I think I really have honed in on this mid-cap space. So these are the companies that are not, if you're looking for someone to tell you how to do payroll, I'm probably not the guy. But if you're looking on how to like reorient the business model so that it turns into recurring revenue, or to look at some of the characteristics of this, or look at costs, or how can we streamline operations instead of these are really, really interesting projects for me. And I love stories that have multiple accretion. So if you think about the valuation of a company, how do you move from advertising revenue to recurring revenue? Or, because that has very different multiple valuation characteristics. And I really glam onto stories that have what I think are a tremendous opportunity on the upside, not just on growing and building a healthy business, like making it really great, but where there is an opportunity to move into another category or another visualization of value. And I think everybody wins when you're able to increase the value of the company. So I really like those kind of stories. And I'm also to the point in my career where I don't want to work with a bunch of jerks. And so there's a lot of egos and things like that. And so I try to think of myself as an easy person to work with, which means that I'm collaborative. It's hard, my job is very hard to say no to a lot of people, that's part of the job. But how do you say no to things that you don't have a lot of conviction and not break a relationship with the people you're working with that you have to sit across from the table for the next 2 to 3, 5 years? And so I think all those are somewhat of the characteristics I do, but I'm also in this story. There's a financial opportunity, risk reward, and I try to have a good calibration of what that is as well.
You've been part of these technology waves, really. I mean, we talked about the .com era, the cloud era. It seems like that's really a big part of your CFO story, as you explained how the business models were changing. more to the subscription, I suppose, recurring revenue models. Now we're in this other era, perhaps. I'm curious how you might look at what many people are calling, the AI era or what have you. How do you look at it? This new chapter that AI seems to be having such an impact on business.
I think it's probably one of the most exciting. I think we'll look back in 10 years or 20 years as this is probably one of the most exciting times that we'll see, certainly in my business career. And because everything's available, right? I'll take our company. So I work for a company called Pax8. I didn't think I mentioned this before, but we are an enterprise marketplace for software. So large vendors, Microsoft, CrowdStrike, these other firms sell on our, and they get access to a part of the industry called MSPs, managed service providers, which in turn is small, medium business. So we have 43,000 of these MSPs on our platform that represent 700 to 800,000 small, medium businesses. So we work as a conduit for this. Well, as AI continues to reconstitute what you can do internally in the company, we're looking at absolutely everything. What can we do to create tons and tons of efficiency? Like, a lot of people are building businesses. You don't even know how to code anymore. You need to learn how to do prompts and things like this. How can we create efficiency in our own operations? And we have targets that we think that we can do 20% more with 20% less, just using tools that are available. So there's this, if we do things correctly, there'll be a massive pickup on efficiency and output from the company in terms of the things that we want to do. And, we're going through our planning cycle right now, and it's really fascinating to see how people have manifested how AI enablement inside the company can do things, from support to things that we can do in accounting to automation of projects that were very, very manual, et cetera. Externally, there's a big sea change in what AI means to other companies. So I think you've probably heard of agentic marketplaces or agentic labor force or some comment of this. But essentially what it is using disparate technology, in case in AI, to create labor components that you can utilize. And so even at Pax8, we're building, we have this incredible distribution for all of these vendors and partners. They're building agentic components. We're building we're a marketplace. We need to incorporate those different, I don't know if you want to call them bots or AI components or something like this, or modules, and enable our downstream clients for efficiency as well. And so I think that a lot of this like big industry is actually moving into the SMB very, very quickly. And we need to be in an AI enablement platform for them.
How do you understand whether the company is really delivering value when it comes to AI and the ambitions of your customers, what they want, what they don't want?
Well, I think we have aggregation points of data that actually people can pull. So we have all these small, medium businesses, and then that aggregates into these managed service providers, MSPs. And we get tons of data, like what are they looking for downstream? Where are their challenges and what's happening in the longer tail of the global distribution? I think the challenge is everyone is trying to figure out what the economics of pricing, and think of it as there was a big wave of APIs, the API marketplaces that were developed years ago. I'm not sure if you're with this. Yeah. As that market evolved, it basically enabled the entire developer community to go out, instead of developing something, it's like, I'll just go pick something off the shelf and I'll build consumption-based pricing. And I think that was a big step forward in the evolution of, if something has useful, you'll continue to use it. And the economics are, equal in the relationship between the person selling it and the person buying it, which is, if I don't like your product, I'll just shut it up and I won't use it anymore. And I think that was a big step forward. I think now we're looking at what is the pricing model for this AI stuff, where if I'm replacing human beings or I'm accelerating, enhancing human being output, how do I split the economics between the provider of the technology and the company? Is that 50-50? Is it consumption-based? Is it the number of calls that you actually do? Is it the number of chats that you have with the customer? And I think that's all evolving in real time. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge in the industry right now is how do you price AI enablement inside of all the ecosystems? And we're doing a lot of price discovery right now and understanding what that's going to look like.
I saw something related to you folks and marketplace evolution. I read that you're enhancing the Pax8 marketplace with integration hubs and public storefronts. And I'm wondering how these changes are shaping partner and vendor engagement, really.
Yeah, I think you always, it's supply demand. So you always want to have more to sell, and you always want to have things that are the most relevant to your downstream customers. So if you look at some marketplaces, they're super crowded with thousands or 10,000. I mean, go to Amazon's probably one of the most efficient marketplaces in the world. And you look for any SKU and they have 10,000 different choices that make it, that kind of obfuscate exactly what you're trying to get to. And we have kind of honed in on, we want to bring best of breed to our clients. So we have 1, 2, 3 different vendors in each one of these things. Well, guess what? These vendors are now building additional modules and components and other things to enhance or make them more omnipresent inside of the IT ecosystem. We want to have a way for those people to actually deliver this stuff and have that as a marketplace and not just be a one-off type of engineering sale. In addition, MSPs are evolving. They're building components and modules and enhancements. So if you have Salesforce, they're building reporting mechanisms, or we can move data from here to here and do some reporting, or we can put a chatbot on top of the data as you interface into your Salesforce data, or something along those lines. Well, why not allow those people to sell those things if they've actually productized them? And we think that expands our market as well. So can we be the epicenter or the ecosystem where people continue to build out their own development and actually have distribution on day one? And we think that's hopefully, and it's still early days, but we think there's a huge value proposition that we're actually in the game of helping you be successful on the vendor side. And we're trying to help all of our downstream customers be more efficient or actually make huge gains on their productivity by incorporating these technologies that people have actually built.
You like to use the, partner ecosystem, the partner experience. These are areas that you have brought up a couple of times now. I'm wondering how the initiatives designed to enhance those experiences, how they feed into your financial planning or ROI measurement as you look to invest in these areas, as you come up with new initiatives to please your partners, energize your vendor relationships. What would you tell us about the ROI as you make those investments?
Yeah. I think if you talk to anyone inside my company, you basically said the 3 letters that I probably say in every other sentence, which is ROI. So one of the hardest things in finance is that you're always being pitched some component of we should do this, and my job and the team's job is to help quantify what is a tangible ROI or put some boundaries on what is success and what is not success. I think it's still early days on a lot of this stuff because like I said before, the business models have not been fully developed in terms of how we're going to think. But I think the investment is like, can we build adjacencies to our current marketplace? We've already built a marketplace and it already works and it's doing, billions of dollars of transactions on it. Why can't we continue to repurpose a lot of the stuff we've already built for the next generation stuff? The things that we're doing with enablement and investments that we're making is how do we make our environment frictionless to work in? So somebody can come in, find exactly what they want. So is that the recommendation engines? Is that the correlation engine where if you're buying this product, you probably want this component too, and it's already pre-integrated for you and ready to move it on into your ecosystem. We spent a lot of time building provisioning. So when at Pax8 in particular, if you buy something on the platform, we go back into the provider system and actually provide, hooks into licenses. We provide you an interface to actually manage those components and stuff. But how do we make it easier for you to work here with us and give you a single pane of glass into your infrastructure? And how can we continue to enhance that experience and things like this? Other things that we're working on is we have there's a lot of emerging technologies. So we have a lot of these like really mega providers on the platform. There's a lot of emerging technologies. How can we bring them into the ecosystem? So we have kind of this like emerging category. How can we build other categories that we can bring next generation technology quickly into our distribution and find and solve the problems of our downstream customers? So I think it's all about customer answer. I mean, when you're a marketplace, you have to continue to evolve for efficiency, and so can buyers find sellers, et cetera.
Are there specific AI initiatives that are helping finance use AI in in what it does?
Yeah, it's like if you sit in my seat, like, and you're on LinkedIn, there is an email. There's probably 20 emails a day about some AI enabled technology that's going to revolutionize your business. I think we have a little bit more of a practical matter, which is analyzing. We're using AI inside the company for more like data insights. I think this is a real challenge. So when you're presented with huge data sets, how do you find anomalies in data sets? And you can use AI to do that very, very quickly instead of writing your own queries and things like this. And you can imagine we have, tens of thousands of transactions. Yeah, I think we have a transaction every 2.5 seconds on our platform. So we have big, big data sets, what we can go through. And then as we think about just core accounting functions, we're building AI, we're using AI to help us. We're all over the world. How do we actually automate as much of the process as possible? And because I come from the enterprise software ecosystem, my dream for our accounting systems is to push one button and everything auto reconciles and all these reports are generated and all this other stuff. And we really become more about consuming data and providing insights to the rest of the company. Like, hey, we have a swath of customers that are moving from, we have tiers inside of our ecosystem, but moving from tier 3 to tier 2. What are the attributes of those firms, and what are marketing programs that we should be building to attack those people to help them on the migration journey so that we actually have more revenue, they're doing more transactions on our platform? And I think it's all about data enablement and using AI to free up time to get away from the rigmarole of just like accounting and finance on a regular day, which is like posting journal entries and stuff like this, to getting to the triage side of the business, which I think is probably the most interesting part, is like, how can we actually be helping the business as instead of just being a function that's like racking and stacking mechanic?
We mentioned that your first CFO appointment came nearly a dozen years ago, roughly. And we're wondering how you as a finance leader looks at your team differently over time. I mean, did you have the same priorities when it came to hiring? Clearly, every organization's different. Every company is might be a different weight class of company. But when it came to finding the right people and how you went about sort of designing the organization, whether there are FP&A folks over here, whether, how you do it, has that evolved? Has that changed?
I would say 100%. And the challenge for me coming in is a lot of people get to the CFO seat through a lifetime of work, meaning they went through like the assistant controller, something, and then they became the CFO. Maybe they did something in IR or something as an investor relationship. And I basically came from some accounting background that, was audit oriented or installing systems, to banker, which is transactional work, straight to the CFO seat. So what are the gaps? Well, I really don't have an operational framework for, how do people do payroll, or how does all the money move between things? What are the governance systems? How do you develop a budget that's tangible? Those kind of things. And so I think really what I had to learn over the last 10 plus years is how to become an expert on operations and not just the transactional side. And really when I first started the job, my view was I need to be surrounded by experts that know these disciplines, because I don't know them. I need to learn from them. I can teach them capital markets and I can teach these other things, but I think it kind of set me up for a relationship with the people that I get to work with to have a collaboration, because in many cases they could probably do my job. I can't do theirs. And so that changes the dynamic of what it is. Now I'm at a point where I think I've honed enough of best practices and things like this where I can actually opine or have a strong opinion on where we need to be in our ecosystem, identify gaps in the systems, the process, and in some cases the people, and course correct those as possible. I think on the hiring front, when you were kind of alluding to the people component, is in banking, I'll just go back to banking because I think it was very formative for me, is you have to hire a lot of people in banking to fill the bottom of the pyramid. And what you realize pretty quickly is when there's a lot of like alpha type people and they're very hungry and they're very, career oriented, is you have to seed it correctly so that you can get the maximum efficiency. In accounting and finance, it's exactly the same thing. There are people that you'll meet along your journey and they are so happy just to do accounts payable for the rest of their lives. This is like, this is what I'm going to do. And when I'm done, I want to go home and I want to play with my dogs. And they have other lives, but can you find the people and get maximum efficiency out of them while they're in their seat doing their job, and understand that they have a whole another life or another work-life balance. But if they're experts in their job, you can maximize what they're doing. So I look for subject matter experts inside of these disciplines. And for me, what I really spend a lot of time with the team is, how are you making your life better? And this goes back into the AI and the automation and stuff. Your job is not just to do the output of process these transactions. And you need to come up with a plan on how to make your job easier every single year for you and your downstream employees. And so it becomes more of an enablement platform, which is, are you looking at AI technologies? What did you evaluate last quarter that would save time? What is a script that you had somebody write? What did you make a change in the data warehouse to actually create efficiency? What insights did you find inside the business to actually do something? And on and on and on. And I would say that I spent almost all of my time working with the team on what are we doing to enable, how can I double the size of the company from a revenue standpoint without doubling the size of the team, and have you work less?
Great. Wow. Thank you for that. Great insights throughout. So appreciate that. We're up to what we like to refer to, Craig, and you've shared a lot of great finance strategic moments for us, but we continue to have this as sort of a standalone chapter inside the podcast where we ask you to look back in time and just choose one, whether it's a transaction, but it's a moment of insight that you've experienced that, allowed you to pursue an opportunity, avoid a risk. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
In everyone's finance life, there's like just a number of crisis moments. And I had joined one company, and it was right after my first CFO job. It was my second one. And it was more of like a private equity firm. And they had kind of like put together three companies into one was the idea. And it's like, and they had this pretty loose correlation of like, first we're going to do this, and then it's going to be point two, and then we're going to take the data and do three. And they built three individualistic business models off of this. And once I got in there, I had to work. It became very apparent that like two of those three things were so fanciful that they were never, ever going to generate $1 of revenue. And so I think it really became a recast of not just the expectations of the business, but how do we take these two other companies that they had bought? And my job was actually to integrate them all together and turn it into one single business model. And go back to the board and this private equity guy and say, like, I think that actually this is a pretty big mistake. Spilt milk over buying the company and what you paid for it. But the ability to actually monetize this portion of it, we need to re-indoctrinate this back into the core product and build a business model around that. And there's different financial ramifications, there's different margin profile, and how can we reconstitute even the sales flows to do this? So it actually became like a restructuring, like consultative project, when originally my job was just like, take these three things and stick them into NetSuite and then run the business going forward. And that transition took like a year. There's a lot of details behind this, but it was just like, it was really, really messy. And at one point you come to a decision in your own career when you're like, is this too messy to even Like, do I even want to deal with this stuff? And I'm kind of, I would describe myself as a little bit of a grinder, which is like, all right, if I'm in, I'm all in
Yeah.
until I'm all out. So I'm all in. So let's figure out how we can do this. We ended up doing we actually got it all together. Recast the business model. The environment continued to change. We did a couple of acquisitions that I think kind of like saved or course corrected the company that kind of plugged in other pieces of technology. And then it ended up doing a merger equals some other. So I think from like what I think was like super problematic, I think that like the finance team and the work that we were doing on how to recast and rescope what the company's objectives were, I would like to think kind of saved the company.
We're going to move quickly to our mentoring round where, you've stepped into, again, quite a few CFO roles, and you must be an expert on that first 100 days. We're looking for advice for new CFOs. What would you share when, having done this as many times, stepped into these new roles? What is it that you have to get done that first 90 days, let's say?
Well, hopefully you can go, in accounting, we do like, what do you do before the close? And I think that you need to have a little bit of a thesis before you actually start the job on where the body's buried to some extent, because you're getting hired there's only a couple of reasons why you're getting hired. One, there's something like materially broken. So that'd be like replacing someone, or there's some issue. Two, first time in the role. So it's like a new thing. So you kind of have more of a blank slate, or through some sort of attrition, someone's retiring or something like this. Let's forget about the retiring thing. Let's take the other two. Is you have to come in with a thesis on what it is. And I think the best way to look at how's the organization working is you got to break it down to three things. What is the systems that you're using? And I'm really big on this. Like, if you don't have good basic plumbing, you don't have anything, right? Two, what are the processes? And I think systems define processes. So you need to understand what are the systems that you're using, and what are the processes that are here, and are they broken? Are they working? Something like this. And then you need to evaluate the people. And I think if you come in with putting each one of those in a separate lens, one will expose the other. And that's part of building a plan. So like, I think before the close, you have a thesis on, this is what I think the state of the nation is. This is where my role is. Is my role more about, I talk about business insights and things like this. Is it more about cleaning up the accounting so there's better reporting? What is the primary mandate? And what is not working, or what could be improved inside of that ecosystem? Because you want to be a change agent. You're not in there to go in and finger point and go, this isn't working. What am I going to do to improve the state of the nation? And focus on that. But I think if you break it down to those three things, systems, process, and people, you will identify exactly where the issues lie, and then you can remediate each one of them in some capacity or another.
Great. We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. You just joined last spring, early April, I guess. Hey, what is one thing most of your colleagues might not know about you?
Oh, me personally? There's two things I'll name two things. One of them, probably everybody knows, is I am a fanatic fan of Formula One. And I will briefly tell you why. Is Formula One is a lot like finance in terms of when you're looking at, there's always people developing these incredible components of a car, the tires, the aero, the engines. If it doesn't work together, you can have the biggest engine in the world, but if the tires don't work or the suspension is something, the car's a complete piece of garbage. And so it's about the continuity of a team working together and the pursuit of perfection. There's no such thing as a perfect lap in F1. And so I love the iterative components, and that's probably a little bit of the grinder of me. So I'm a fanatic. I have a racing simulator in my garage. I watch all these races. I go to the races. Okay. Most people know that. Probably the secret that, not secret, but a lot of people know, is I am also a fanatic about art history. And it's a little bit unusual. And my parents were very good about, when I was getting my degree, like, get a degree in something that you can make money in, and then use your minor or whatever else on something that you might find interesting. And the reason why I like art history is there's an emotional component to how people display themselves through art. And if I think about like my attitude towards how I talk with my employees or talk with my peers or the board or some of this, there's an emotional component to it. And it actually radiates very, very transparently. So like, if you're in a bad mood, the words you choose and the way that you reflect yourself becomes pretty apparent to your colleagues, whether you're explicitly or inexplicitly expressing yourself. The same thing happens in art. So you look back at the Picassos or the Goyas or whatever period you're really into. These guys are, I mean, their emotional state is on the canvas, even though they might be telling a story. So, you know, the Picasso went through like the blue period where he's like super depressed, and other people went through these other things. They're trolling the kings by painting them with little tiny hands or whatever it is. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I don't think a lot of people would see that thing or know that I spent a lot of time with people. So.
Wow, great insights there for us. Wonderful. Thank you. We are up to our final question. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so I better wind things up for us. But what we'd like to do is ask you for your priorities for the coming 12 months. And what would those be as a CFO? What are your priorities?
So I'm at a new company. So like my priorities are kind of like part of my 100-day plan, and what am I going to do going forward? One, and this is maybe a little bit more Pax8 specific, but we have grown a lot through some minor acquisitions. We now are operating in where we have people in 20 different countries. And what that does is it creates a lot of fragmentation of the team. And what that means is I have 3 complete accounting teams, top to bottom, in 3 different regions, EMEA, APAC, and the US. I need to consolidate those. And it's not necessarily a consolidation of the people, but the processes and how we're interacting with our accounting systems and how we're doing reporting. And basically converging that, because I can see that it's already so astray. Like we had a meeting before this and just talking about even very simplistic things. The chart of accounts is somewhat different in each region, and they're processing things differently. That means they're making different assumptions and things like this. That needs to get cleaned up ASAP. And then on top of that, really my whole thing is like the enablement of the business. So what are we doing to grow as quickly and as efficiently as possible? And that is some of the topics we talked about before, like AI enablement inside of our ecosystem. And what are we doing to provide better insights into the company? So we are building a team focused on data extraction, data layers, data reporting, that we can continue to push back to our partners in the region and decision makers in the company so that we can be much better partner. And I think there's some gaps that we can fill that.
Craig Foster, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks, Jack. Good to see you again.